And welcome to another video of mine. In today's video I want to talk about the UK tax system. Before I get into it, I will set some ground rules. I'm not really interested in any vitriol from either the left or the right. Politics is a game of balancing people's wants, and it tends to be a balance scale. At least you'd hope it would be. Maybe we've kind of lost that after the bombshell that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, lied to the public. What a shock. She's not the first person on that party or within that party who has lied about something and been caught short. Let's get into it. So, last couple of days, it's come out that there wasn't a 20 billion black hole that needed to be plugged. There was a 4 billion surplus. Instead of doing the prudent thing, they've decided to increase taxes, which they probably didn't need to do. And they've gone down the ideological route that people with less deserve more and people with more, well, need to shoulder the burden, which I think as an entrepreneur I think it's a bit of an insult. It won't particularly affect me. It won't affect me for decisions I made over past years, but it's going to affect a lot of people. And for me, also, this is kind of like an ideological argument because for the life of me, I do not understand why you would disincentivize hardworking people and incentivize, I don't want to say lazy people, but there will be an element of there being lazy people in that group of people who will benefit from it. Rachel, in her infinite wisdom, has decided to take away the two-child cap in terms of there being a cut-off point for further help. I think this is a very contentious issue, not only because you should support people with children, because one, they're people, and two, they're future taxpayers, but to what extent? If you give to someone who isn't a contributor in the system, you take from someone who is a contributor. I do believe that the UK system is incredibly flawed at the moment because you've got individual groups that are pitted against each other. So you've got wealthier people who are like, why am I taking the burden when I'm more than paying my adequate share? And you've got people who are at the lower ends of the earning threshold, such as pensioners and minimum wage jobs. People are kind of stuck in the welfare gap where if they earn more, they lose it in other areas. I saw this myself growing up, and I think the system was less complicated then, but I don't recall ever reading about it until looking after the fact. So my mother was stuck in a position, like many mothers, where if you work more, you don't get to see your children grow up, and you also get hit with losing money from the state. And I've always seen it as an absolutely insane position to put someone in, because you're not incentivizing someone to go and do better. You're capping them and you're kind of trapping them. Actually, I'd say it's more of a trap, because you're going to lose, or ladies are going to lose, the bulk of their good years raising children. And let's bear in mind, your energy levels decrease. So I'm only in my mid-30s. I do not have the energy of a sprightly young 20-something. I just don't. I'm like a sloth. I sleep most days. It's fantastic. And thankfully, I have a job that allows me to wake up when I want. But you're taking away some of these years where they could be adding skills and they could be getting better at their job and commanding a higher wage. That's no longer there. The government incentivise it, but then when they go back to the workforce, they've lost out that competitive edge. Although we're losing that competitive edge as a country anyway. So how many of the higher ending jobs, higher earning positions are left in the country? I wouldn't say there's that many. Like, I'm not including my position as an entrepreneur and a business owner. I think I'm kind of outside of the system. Now, to go back to the contentious issue of taking from the people who have more money and giving it to people who have less money, I think if you speak to most people, myself included, we don't really have a problem with tax. Like, tax is what it is. It's part of the system. It's when it becomes burdensome to the point that you feel victimized into paying it. It's like an unearned dividend that the government takes. Fair enough. I could up and leave. I could work less. I could pay myself less. There's many options that I could go around it. But essentially, those options are the government disincentivizing someone like myself. And I think that is just the wrong way to do it. There's not many people who've cottoned on to the fact, and I've been saying this for a few years, I think the government is too big. The state is too big. We spend too much money on the state. We spend too much money on debt obligation. They tried to make the state smaller, and they had their asses handed to them by the backbenchers. So they've gone the opposite way on steroids, and that is absolutely insane. Instead of saying, we got a problem with our spending, if I have a credit card and I go over the limit, I get heavily penalised. But for a government, especially a government that issues debt in its own currency, modern monetary theory is madness. They just want to print and print and print. And to bring it back to what I do, the reason your gold and silver has gone up, it's not because of tensions and war and all that. The bulk of it is linked to the money supply. You're going to have geopolitical tensions move the price. Sure, that's always happened. But why has it consistently gone up, and why does that line up with the graph of the increase of the money supply? The West is so indebted, and to have a government, instead of saying we got problems and we need to tackle not only this debt, but kind of the apathy that has swept across the UK. And I don't know about the other Western countries, but I know there's issues elsewhere. They've gone, to shut people up, we just pay them more money. We take from the bulk and we pay the ones who are struggling, we're paying more money. I think it's absolutely insane. It's absolute insanity, and it's not the way to run a country, because some parts of the population might benefit from it. It might make their life easier. But when the money runs out, and it will, there are forces in play that will stop the ever increasing printing of money. I think the only country that could probably get away with it is the United States. How long though? How long before it cracks? Personally, I think it's already cracked. That's my opinion. That's not me saying buy gold, buy silver. I think it's already hit the point of they're in a lot of trouble. I think the UK is in a lot of trouble. I think France it's done. It's toast. It's cooked. It's not coming back from that. There has to be some form of debasement, which they've done via inflation. That's why we've had rampant inflation. So a few years ago, I made the case. I said I don't think they put interest rates up that high, because I don't think they hate the public enough to do it. And what I didn't realise at the time, it's probably not that they hate the public. It's probably they've looked at it and they thought, if we don't do this, we're done. So they kick the can. But how long can you keep kicking the can? Now, in terms of the tax side of it, in terms of the different subsections, I don't understand why the UK is so convoluted and complex in terms of their tax payment. And I don't buy the idea that it's preferential treatment. Just get a good accountant. They will put you in the right direction. You build a business and get a good accountant, they pay for themselves. It's not out the reach of anyone if you have a business. If you work for someone else, it is out the reach, but it's slightly different. The thing I find absolutely abhorrent, though, is the fact that they've turned around and they're essentially slamming small to medium-sized businesses. And then they're saying, oh, actually, everyone's struggling. We need to raise more money to solve this problem. And the tail doesn't wag the dog. It's like, no, you need to open up the economy. You need to regulate it, don't get me wrong, but you need to open it up and you need to make the pie bigger. You don't want to take a bigger tax take from a pie that is the same size. You want a bigger pie, and you can do that via a smaller tax take, because you're dealing in an overly competitive world these days. You've got to compete with other countries that have lower taxes. Ireland is a fantastic example. Now, Ireland probably has some problems. It might have a lot of problems. I'm not too well versed in it, but I know that when they lowered the tax rate, it did them the world of good. It did bring a lot of tax take to the country. So in my mind, it's like, well, this government clearly hates people. They will lie to the people to get what they want. They will give out money to people to buy votes, which is treachery, if you ask me. I think that is a level of national self-harm. I think they should be done for treason, and I don't say that lightly. I'm not for prosecuting and persecuting people, but if you put your own self-interest above everyone's interest, even though everyone is funding this, I think that's insane. I think this country is too quick to cancel projects. There's too many regulations. So you look at the HS2. For the life of me, as someone who lives in the southeast, I have no problem paying money for HS2 to go ahead, because I think it would open up the country, and I think it would do the country good. It won't affect me. Yeah, it will never affect me in my life, because I will never be in, say, Leeds or Manchester or Liverpool. I'm always going to be someone who lives down south. I lived in Newcastle once, fantastic place, too bloody cold. Can't do it. It's cold here. It's way colder up there. But the government needs to shrink. It needs to invest, and it needs to grow. And you can't grow yourself out of a problem by increasing the tax burden. So in my personal situation, I looked at my finances and I just went, well, hang on, I've now got to file 5 tax returns instead of 1. So that's a burden. I come off the VAT because it was a burden, not financially. Fiscally, it was fine, but paperwork side of it. So they're doubling down, and it just strikes of a party who they've never really worked in a business or run a business. There's lots of things that I have to do throughout the year, and different parts of the year I trade in different ways. Some parts of the year are more aggressive and some parts of the year are more defensive. You've noticed that I've started to trade differently with my can I make 20% profit, because it's a lower risk, higher return model. I'm not constantly worrying where I'm going to find 20, 30,000 pound. And that's hard. Like, I used to slap down 25k on a lot of transactions. You got to find it. But can you find that when you've got tax season? Yes. But then you got ISA season, and I'm fortunate that I'm in a position where I can fill my ISA each year. I say fortunate, I work bloody hard for it. But equally, there's little things throughout the year that work like that. This government hasn't really taken that into account. There's very much a sense of seasonal business in the UK. You go down the coast, some of these businesses, they will make what they need in 3 months and it will cover them the year. And they're pretty much on standstill over the winter months. So I do think this has left a lot to be desired. I do want to mention the ISA and the pensions whilst I'm at it. With the ISA, they're trimming down the cash part of it, although I read that they're keeping it for the over 65s, I believe it was. If that's slightly off, please comment. I don't want to put out misinformation. And I thought, okay, but you shouldn't be taking away the last free lunch. They've put up dividend tax, which I think is insane. For someone like me, it's like, well, I go out and I make it work. There's plenty of people who they try to be entrepreneurs and businesses, and most of them go to the wall. You've got to incentivize people to take that risk. Otherwise, what's the point? If you can earn 25k working in a minimum wage job stacking shelves, and they've taken out the aspiration to earn more because you're being heavily taxed, well, we're going to have a nation of really high earners and really low earners. You're going to hollow out the middle, which will put the burden of tax, if the state stays the same in terms of its size, it's going to put the burden of tax onto everyone else. And that is an absolute catastrophe. That is insanity. It's such a awful way to run a country, because you've taken hope away from people. You've taken that aspiration. When I was growing up, I remember going to London. I must have been 11, 12. I saw London as a place of aspiration. And at the time, I was like, I just want to make loads of money. But as I got older, I realised I don't really like money, but I just wanted more than what I had. Because when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot. That's okay. There's lots of people in that situation. But I never looked at someone earning more money going, oh, well, screw that person. It never crossed my mind. I don't know if that's common amongst my peers. I don't know. Now, in terms of the pension side of things, I think that's probably the most self-destructive thing they've done in this budget. They're taking away the salary sacrifice. So you're pitting one part of the country against the other. You're pitting the state versus the private sector, because on the state side, they tend to have good pensions. Okay, there's a reason you work for the state. It kind of equalizes. You've gone to the private sector and said, hang on, no, any of the perks. And the reason they've done this is because it gives them more tax in a way that is not what you'd think. So by capping the salary sacrifice, okay, they receive slightly more national insurance, but also they get more in tax from like your one-man bands like me, because it will go on corporation tax or it go on income tax. And I just think, what an awful way to tell the people of the country that you've got no hope, no future, the state is going to continue to grow, you will be happy with what you get, and that's the end of it. Crazy. So yeah, overall, did I like the budget? Like I said, it won't really affect me. I'm already making enough tax-free via my ISA. So it was taxed first and then put my ISA. It's not tax evasion. I'm already making enough that it doesn't really affect me. But for every person like me who took advantage of these things back then, there's probably a lot of people who didn't, and they're bearing the brunt of it now. Now, I'm probably going to vote with my feet and say, no, you'll get a set amount. I will pay what I have to, but I'm not working harder to receive less. I'm not being penalised for my endeavour. And I feel if you watch a lot of YouTube channels, way bigger channels than mine, maybe some smaller channels, I think the consensus is going to be the same, that the UK system is absolutely rotten to the core at the moment, and this is probably the worst government I've ever experienced. And I lived through the the condemn government. Oh, we're not going to raise tuition fees, 9k. Crazy. And where have the Lib Dems been ever since? They never really had power again. Not really. They might power share with someone, but it'll be fractured. The truth is they got their golden ticket and they absolutely wasted it. And I think that the way Labour's going, will Labour be a party in the future? You never know, but I can't see it. I think they've just done so much that is out of touch, and so much that has been harmful for the general public. And it's fallen so far since they come into office. And don't get me wrong, I know there's going to be people that say, well, the Conservatives, they didn't leave us in a good place. That's granted. I'm not here to shout about past ills. I'm not really that bothered either way, because it's always, it's a balancing beam. There's going to be some policies that are good for me and some policies that are bad for me, and that's usually the case. But overall, it needs to be a fair balancing act. And I feel this Labour government has just got it wrong, and the standard of living it's fallen through the floor, whether that be on free speech, because I do think we have a free speech problem at the moment, whether that be on tax, whether that be on personal safety, whether that be on debt. And yeah, the Conservatives made a lot of errors on that one. So yeah, that's my view on the tax system at the moment. I don't have much nice to say about it. I will pay my taxes as per usual, but it's certainly, I think we'll look back in time and we'll realise that we've got a lot of problems at the moment, and it might take maybe a couple of decades to fix this. We shall see. Someone needs to be brave, but it's not this lot in power. They only look after themselves, unfortunately, which it sounds counterintuitive, the fact that they want to increase benefits, but they're not increasing benefits because it's good for everyone. They're doing it to try and salvage any votes they can. Maybe that makes me a cynic. Anyway, I will see you on the next video. I hope that hasn't been too much of a ramble. I hope it encourages discussion. I always like to hear people's views. Just keep it friendly. There's nothing wrong with cordial debate, but I'm not interested in the he said, she said slanging matches that sometimes allows itself, which I don't agree with that. It doesn't solve a purpose. So take care, guys. Bye.